And welcome back to A Spirited Debate. The pristine image of Jesus Christ with a halo and perfectly white garments may be more manufactured of a depiction than actual reality. In fact, he may have been a great deal more human, getting dirty and gritty. Author Johnny Moore explains in his new book, Dirty God, Jesus in the Trenches. Johnny's also the vice president of Liberty University, and he joins me now from Washington, D.C. Welcome, Johnny. Always great to have you.
Thanks, Lauren. Good to be with you.
Okay, I'm having a little hard time hearing. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, you can hear me, but okay, of course, if you can hear me, then we're okay. So what do you mean then first by a dirty God? Let's just get that out of the way, off the table right now.
Yeah, this is a little controversial to some people, I guess, but what I'm trying to do is resurrect the image of Jesus the human. You know, for more than 1,500 years, the Universal Church has agreed that Jesus was both fully human and fully divine. And so the humanity of Jesus is what I'm referencing in the title of the book, The Dirty God, the God who got dirty so the world could become clean.
But I mean, physically, he must have been, dirty as well. I mean, he wasn't like Teflon. I mean, dirt didn't stick to him. I mean, because we see the picture of Jesus where the woman is washing his feet with his tears and with her tears and the perfume and all of that. So I mean, physically dirty as well. But that's not what you're focused on, right?
No, it's a metaphor for the grace of Jesus. You know, and by the way, Jesus did this for a reason. When as Christians believe, he decided as God to come down to planet Earth to save the whole world. I mean, he could have come down in all kinds of different ways. But what did he do? He chose to be more in a little town called Bethlehem, in a manger. He lived in a small little village of 400 people. He lived a really regular life. He recruited a lot of really regular people to be his followers. And so, somehow this idea of Jesus getting dirty so the world could get clean it's a metaphor for grace. God has given us grace in this way. And also, it's really important to our understanding of Christianity and of Jesus because Jesus is the God who became like us. He's the God who became like a man or woman so that people can understand what it is to follow a God like them. And so, I've written a book about grace through the lens of the everyday Jesus, the Jesus that had to live life the way we had to live life, that had the struggles that we had. And so if you look at the Gospels that way, all of a sudden it becomes really relevant and really alive.
You talk about grace, and do you think a lot of people understand what that word actually means? Because there's a movie out right now which is based on the Broadway musical Les Miserables, which is now in the film version. And that movie is a word picture of, as a story about grace. Do you think people really understand the concept?
It's interesting that grace is sort of intuitive to people because every great novel, every great story, that's a wonderful example. It seems like the prevailing theme through the great literature and the great stories of history is this theme of redemption. Someone stepping in, taking the fall for someone else, someone sacrificing for them. And so it seems like somehow intuitively man's heart is drawn towards grace. Man cares about grace, but it's a word that gets caught up in lots of theological language and people are really confused by it. So I define it really simply. I think grace is just the kindness of God given to us as demonstrated in Jesus Christ. And it's something he's given to us and something he's given us the privilege of giving to the world. So he's been kind to us. He saved our souls, cleansed our sins. If you put your trust in him, that's what Christians believe. And then we should model that for other people. I think one of the reasons why all of us are drawn to stories, like Les Miserables, is because this story is somehow tuned in the human heart. This is what Jesus has done. This is Christianity.
Yeah, I think we see it, we know grace when we see it, but how do you give it as one who feels like, you recognize it when grace is given to others, but how do you give it?
It's interesting that the whole first half of my book, Dirty God, is about getting grace, understanding grace, and the second half is about this. It's about giving grace. And one of my points is that grace is something that's given in all kinds of ways. It's given in 1,000 different ways. It's given in little ways, like when you leave an envelope with a little extra money on the desk of a single mom, or when you share a kind and encouraging word to someone that's in need. It's given in those little ways, but it's also given in grandiose ways, like when the global church decides that they're going to take things seriously, like human trafficking or or combating poverty, and they decide to leverage their influence to do that. And so, I think all of us know what it's like to receive someone else's kindness, and giving grace is when you do to others what you enjoy that when they do to you. So if you're kind, if you enjoy people being kind to you, then you be kind to them. And the great metaphor is in Christianity, grace given by God to us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world, He gave His only Son, so that whoever believes in Him, will have eternal life. I mean, that's the image. Jesus coming down to rescue us.
Yeah. One of the things you talk about is Jesus in the trenches, and you're talking about a dirty God, which is totally different, not totally different, but a great deal different from what most people kind of think of God. They think of God as being up here, doesn't have time for us, He's busy doing other things. Where do we get the image of God, of Jesus, as sort of this pristine, whitewashed kind of image, never dirty, never gritty, and sort of apart from us? Where do we get that image?
I think it's actually an image that's largely borrowed from other religions and other religious ideas. Christianity is the religion that tells the story of God coming down. I mean, it wasn't man working really hard to get to God, to climb the ladder to heaven. I mean, it's God dropping the ladder down, coming down with us and bringing us. And so I think it's emblematic of the general idea of religion around the world. The big, holy God on the temple on the top of the hill, the God that you have to work really hard to get His attention. You have to beg and plead. And then in the moment, of history, when Christians believe Jesus came, it's a different story. So I actually think it's less Christian than it is sort of the borrowing of other religious ideas that have been prevalent throughout history. I mean, this is Jesus. Jesus wasn't the Greco-Roman God that lived in the glorious temple with the perfect physique. I mean, Jesus is the God who owned everything and had all the power on planet Earth, as Christians believe, but He decided to come with us. See, I believe that if you met Jesus 2,000 years ago and you sat down and talked to Him, you would feel like He understood your life. And that's what sets Christianity apart, I think, in the idea of who God is and what God has done with regard to man's problems and man's sin.
I want to ask you just one question about the controversy over the Reverend Louis Giglio. Are you familiar with this pastor who withdrew his name from consideration for giving the benediction at President Obama's second inaugural? Are you aware of the story?
Oh, yeah, and I know Louis and have followed him a long time.
What do you think about this? Basically, he withdrew his name because so critics pointed out a sermon he gave in the 1990s, which he totally blasted the gay rights agenda. What do you think about this controversy?
I actually think this is a watershed moment. I really think this is, unfortunately, what I think is going to be the story of evangelicals in the Obama administration for the next 4 years. I mean, this should have been the perfect picture. An evangelical who perhaps disagrees with the president on some issues, but he and the president are working together to combat the 27 million, modern-day slaves around the world. I mean, this should have been a perfect picture of how people on different sides of the spectrum can be co-belligerents. But what happened? I mean, this message went out to culture that we will tolerate everyone, but evangelicals. And what I think is really unfortunate about the whole thing is after Louis, apparently withdraws his name from the inauguration because of the controversy, the inaugural committee, writes this, statement that basically, throws this guy under the bus who's working with the Obama administration to combat human slavery despite having different perspectives. And, this is a moment that I think lots of evangelicals need to pay attention to. It seems like bigotry, intolerance towards them. And by the way, the president said something. He said, when he won this election, he said he was going to be the president for all Americans. And I'm just wondering whether he had any intention of that whatsoever. Right. I think the president needs to remember that half of Americans voted against him, and he's the president of all Americans. And this really isn't a good start in a country that celebrates the freedom of religion.
All right. I want to thank you very much, Johnny Moore, author of Dirty God, Jesus in the Trenches, and vice president of Liberty University. Thank you so much for your insight. It's really wonderful, always wonderful to hear from you.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
All right.